But this is a time normally, and we'll do this now. We have a few minutes because we're only 9 minutes late for supper, so we have a few minutes. All right, we were 45 minutes late for lunch one day. All right? But we have time. We could take 1 or 2 questions or comments if you want to raise your hands. We won't have a lot of time for them, so go ahead and just raise your hands. We'll get some mics here. Zarek's got one. Daweed's got another one on the other side. Leanne, go ahead.
So in Hebrews...
You're going to have to put that right up by your mouth.
Does the John 15 in bearing fruit tie directly to Hebrews 11 on the yielding of the peaceful fruit?
Where in Hebrews 11?
Hebrews 12:11.
Oh, 12:11.
Is that the same fruit?
Okay, is the fruit? Yes. Yes, we're talking about, John 15 was talking about the one that does not bear fruit. Well, this is the fruit you're supposed to be bearing. Because through the discipline, you should be then kept as a branch in him, and you would bear the fruit, the peaceable fruit of righteousness. Absolutely, good connection. Appreciate that. Dawn.
Rabbi, you said that we shouldn't.
No, I didn't say it.
Put our Bibles like on the floor or anything like that, or put anything on them, and that was just kind of a tradition. But in Christianity, we're taught that this is our basic instructions before leaving Earth, and it's our manual, and we're supposed to treat it like a manual and highlight things, make notes in it. How does our Jewish brother view us when we write in our words?
Okay, good question. Can I tell you a story to answer that question? Okay, once upon a time, when I was in college, and some of you know my journey, when Abba got my attention to think vertically, because I was a secular Jew, I went to the rabbi, and in the college, because I knew a little bit about Judaism. I also wanted to explore everything, but I went to Judaism. And he had me starting on a journey of trying to figure out Judaism a little bit. And I went out to the Jewish bookstore, and I bought a Chumash. The Chumash is the 5 books, the first 5 books of your Bible. Okay, it was in Hebrew on one side and English on the other. And in my studies, at some point, I started to realize that there was, because I knew Hebrew, I realized in looking at the Hebrew that it said Elohim only throughout chapter 1 of Genesis, and that the Yahweh Elohim doesn't show up till chapter 2. And so I'm trying to figure out the significance and the differences with these things, and I took a yellow highlighter and highlighted these things. Then I brought it back to him to ask him about what I saw, and he was like, ah! Does that answer your question? Okay. He said, don't ever do that again. So no, our Jewish brothers would not understand what you do. I don't see the word that way. Okay? I often use my pen in my scriptures to write down something significant that will remind me next time I get to that verse of something that I came to understand that's useful to me about that word. So I don't think that's disrespectful to highlight your book or to write notes at all. But appreciating, because you're enhancing its value to you, the value of what he's given you so that you understand it better. Isn't that why we put notes, so that you understand it better? Or whatever little details or highlights of what you're doing, because it makes it more useful to you. So that's fine. I see that way. Now, our Jewish brother's not going to understand it, but I don't need to do everything because I'm worried about them being offended. Otherwise, the only way to do that is to become a Jew. If that's really the goal, I'm going to have to, and that, by the way, that doesn't even work, because when I was a Jew, my Orthodox brothers thought I was a goy. Unless you were from, which is the Hebrew word for observant and keeping all the things, they thought I was a goy. I had a girlfriend of mine in college. She was Orthodox, and I was sitting with her in a living room, and her mother walked in the house and absolutely ignored me as if I wasn't even there. Never happened in my life. Have you ever had that happen in your life? I mean, literally someone not just like ignore you and look at you and glare at you. I mean, actually pretended I wasn't in the room. Okay? And I'm Jewish. But I had an interest in her daughter way before I met my wife. And Abba didn't allow that to go anywhere. But I was sitting with her in the house, and the parent ignored me because if I were to try to please that segment of Judaism, I would have to become an Orthodox Jew. Oh, but wait a minute, that wouldn't work because some of the Orthodox Jews don't like the other Orthodox Jews. So we have to limit our idea of trying to please them. When it doesn't make a difference, let's do something that's not going to offend our brothers. This is why I encourage the blue and white for the seats instead of all the multicolored things that people do. Because our brother's not going to appreciate that. Besides which, I can make a case to prove to you why they're supposed to be white and blue and not other colors. But what about things like the book? Well, you can say to your brother, I'm, just like, by the way, their books have writings in them. They're just approved. They're already pre-typed. They're called Targums. They're called things like Rashi's commentary. So there already is footnotes in them. You're just wanting to put your own. You're not doing anything disrespectful. So that's a good question. However, since it really doesn't have anything to do with your walk to not do this and put a phone on it or some other thing on top of your book, then why not do that? And it doesn't make any difference to not put it on the floor, so why not do that? It's about your mindset about the book when you treat it that way. If you just finished with your study and just sort of toss your book somewhere, what does that say about how you feel about the word? But if you respectfully put it nicely somewhere and it holds a place of honor and respect, not because it's an idol or something, but the word is in there. So I want to give it honor. Does that answer the question? Okay, good. Okay, Sarah Beth?
And this may be redundant. You may have just answered it already. But I figured I'd ask since it's a question in my head. When we were in the Jewish community, I was taught what you said about it doesn't go on the floor, but there was a step ahead of that, and it may have just been the specific sect we were with, and they don't all agree. But we were taught that it only stays on a surface that's above the waist. Like anywhere you sit would be the same as the floor.
I've heard things like that also. Of course, you could take anything to the nth degree if you want. I'm just saying out of very simple respect, when you put it on top of the pile, you're giving it an honored elevation. You're elevating its honor and respect above everything else it's sitting on. And putting it on the floor is clearly disrespectful, okay? Because how many times have you said to a child, why is your this or that on the floor? It doesn't belong on the floor. Well, why would you put a book that has the word in it on the floor? If you think that they shouldn't put a piece of clothing or some other thing that you think shouldn't be on the floor, this is more valuable than any of those things. This will change your life and get you forever. The other thing is replaceable, So let's treat it that way. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, on this side first. Kara?
Okay, I just have a question about what you were saying about trials. My understanding of trials has always been that, you get trials as, what you were saying about discipline, how it's supposed to discipline you, and then you're supposed to change as a result of that. Like you're doing something wrong, and then obviously things in your life are going to go wrong because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You need to get back on track. But I guess I felt like in this teaching you were also alluding to trials are basically just a part of life as well, and they perfect us and they make us better. So how would you differentiate between those two, trials that come because you were doing something wrong and trials that are just meant to make you a better person?
That's a good question. And by the way, I don't know if you were there for the other parts or maybe it could have been missed because I said so much in the last 3 parts, right? It's over 3 hours worth of stuff. Remember we talked about the idea of a pop quiz? Some trials are a pop quiz. You didn't do anything wrong. Abba just wants to see what you do. So now that doesn't answer your question yet, but that's part of what we talked about. So there are 2 types of trials. The one that's a discipline and the other one's a pop quiz. And so how do you know the difference? You get counsel. Okay? You get counsel. Also, when you get through it also depends on when you get through the thing. If the thing is going long and long and long and you're enduring, but nothing seems to be getting better, it may be because he's trying to get your attention about something specific and you're not paying attention. So you may have to have someone help facilitate talking to you to try to figure out what is it that you've been doing that maybe brought this on. I don't want you to get to the place where, and there are a lot of people already in this place, where absolutely everything that happens you think is because you did something wrong. Oh, I must have done something wrong. I stubbed my toe. I must have done something wrong. I dented the car. I must have done something. Not everything you do is because you did something wrong. Time and chance happen to everybody. Everybody. Solomon told us that, right? And sometimes it's just a pop quiz. But when you have that all understood, to that level that you have it understood, if you're not sure, and most of the time you'll figure it out. In other words, sometimes a trial or something comes up, and it comes up absolutely because you know that you did something. And it's no surprise you're getting disciplined. Most children are that way. But you love the look on their face, though, when you go to discipline them, and they look at you like, I can't believe. Did you do that? Yes. Were you supposed to do that? No. Did you know if you did that, I'd punish you? Yes. Why are you acting surprised? So if it's one of those ones that you can't tell, that's when you seek counsel. And maybe that counsel through the Ruach, because the Ruach will give the counsel something that he may not give you, because the Ruach wants you to go through counsel. I've seen this many times. During the counsel is when the inspiration might come, and a question might come up, well, is there something like this going on, or is that going on, whatever, and then the person goes, oh, wait a minute, that is going on. And that might be the thing. Then they make the necessary adjustment, and guess what? The trial ends. And so that's the fruit that tells you is if you make an adjustment and the adjustment works, the trial goes away. All right. Next question was on this side, okay? Patricia?
Susan.
Susan?
That's okay. So
I don't know. I figured there was like 3 Patricias here. If I guess Patricia, I'll get it right.
Good try. I'm in 2 Timothy 2, and where it says and it's verse 14. So remind them of this, earnestly witnessing before the master, not to wage verbal battles, which is useless, to the overthrowing of the hearers. So I just would like you to kind of expound on that a little bit, because in our journeys, it's not about getting into a verbal battle with people, but even your story of the Baptist preacher, you know, how do we distinguish? Because we want to be, we want to earnestly be witnessing. And so I just wanted you to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Okay. And first of all, I'm not going to verbal battle over whether your name is Susan or Patricia. And I apologize for that. I'm really trying to get a lot of the names of the people I don't know very well. And there's 2 or 3 of you that I've met and not met well enough to connect the names right. And I really feel, please don't be offended by that. Okay, so that question is really good. And by the way, first of all, I didn't say this about the story about the Baptist preacher, but when I did what I did, was I right or wrong? Yes, thank you. Nate got it right. He said I was right or wrong. Thank you. That was useless. Just like the battle over here that talks about being useless. I was wrong. I was young in this. It was many years ago. I was trying to pick a fight. I was trying to show him he didn't know what he was talking about. I absolutely was setting him up for that kind of battle. And what we have to get away from is this. This is a Christian idea, not a Bible idea. Christian idea. Witnessing. Witnessing is not scriptural. You're going to be a witness. Your life is a witness. Okay? You live as a witness. You don't have to go to people and tell them anything unless the Father draws them to you. Okay? We have to be careful. That's a Christian system-designed idea. Well, we got to go out and witness to people. Good. Keep the Sabbath, wear seat, don't use foul language, don't eat unclean foods, don't commit adultery, don't steal. That's a witness. Especially the people who want to witness and they don't want to wear the seat. I don't know what you're thinking. There's your witness. It's like something visibly obvious to people that they'll go, by the way, you want people to talk to you? Maybe they'll ask you, hey, what's that? Now, if they do, don't take that as license to now vomit everything you know on them. I'm glad you asked. Blah, 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 blah. Which is not speaking in tongues, by the way. I'm just vomiting. Okay? But we do that. Let me tell you how to do this correctly. The person you're talking to who may ask you a question, like the gentleman that you ran into at Walmart, actually had some interest and turned out that they were part of the body to some degree, and you invite them in and the whole thing. When someone asks a question, you don't know if they're curious or interested. They could be either one. They just don't know what you're wearing. Got their attention. So the way you can tell the difference is very simple. Simply answer just the question they asked. Don't tell them anything else. If they have any more curiosity or interest, they'll ask a second question. After a series of questions, you'll find out either you got a very curious person who's just really curious about everything, or they actually are interested. But let them lead. Don't think, oh, like a guy who's out there constantly casting out the line and finally, oh, got one, and you start reeling them in. No, that's Christian thinking. Okay, it's a system. It's not really what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be prepared if he draws somebody to us to give an answer for our beliefs, to defend why we believe, to explain things about why we do and why we don't do certain things. Does that make any sense to anybody? Okay? And I should have mentioned it because it's a good point that you made that. What I did with that Baptist pastor was rude and obnoxious of me, quite frankly. I already knew what he was going to say, and I wanted to make him look stupid. I did. I was young in this. I was cocky. I thought I knew everything. And he came over, actually just in a very nice social call. I was actually at a person's place of business who was part of our ministry at the time. This was one of his friends who was a customer of his business who came to say hello. I got introduced as his rabbi, which the guy probably just assumed I was Jewish. So I wouldn't know anything about the New Testament anyway. Hey, this is Rabbi Steve. And so I'm the one who said, so let me ask you a question. So once saved is always saved, whatever. I provoked the fight. I was wrong. That's a humorous story. We all get a good kick out of it, but you know what? Really, I was wrong. Okay? Now, later, he was so mad about it. And the part of the story that's funny is that I was there because the wife of the guy who was doing this was a professional massage therapist and wanted to bless my wife and I each with a massage. And so when I went in to get mine, which was after this initial conversation, he started banging heads with my wife about this stuff, and he told her she was going right to hell. And she almost, she was going to go, don't push my wife. She was going to tell him what when he said, what did you say? I'm going to, no. So he kind of really popped his cork on her, which that again was my fault. I'm the one who put him to the boiling point. Did that answer your question though? Okay. On this side, so where's the mic? Okay, Raymond, go ahead. I'm just trying to make sure I'm playing
Right, no, that was really,
ping pong here.
That was really good timing because I was about to the point where I was starting to take notes on my thoughts so I didn't lose it.
Okay, good.
All right, so first off, because what always happens to me is I get a thought, and then in between the time that I get the thought and then you get the turn, there's like some other things that will come up, and so I just want to say, coming from, a similar background, I cannot understand. It's impossible to overstate enough and to give enough support to what was just said, because it's really hard when you are coming from a background that tells you that you're dishonoring God unless you, just grab everybody you see and shout what you believe, into their ears as loud and proud as you can. And you've been programmed that way. It's very powerful because you don't want to dishonor him and you don't want to come across like you don't appreciate what he's done for you. But it's really just the way he said it was beautiful and a really great representation of what we believe. The other thing was to lend some support, if you haven't thought about it, why it can be so important to get counsel when you're dealing with a long-term trial, a long-term adversity, is they make us not think so straight sometimes, and you really do need that more objective, more experienced perspective to kind of help bring you out of the fog a bit or sort things out or bring something out that you don't see, and it can be really important. We have this tendency sometimes to beat ourselves up when we really shouldn't, or to exempt ourselves when we really shouldn't, and counsel can help with that. I know somebody with a disability, and this is probably a lifelong disability they're dealing with, and it is probably not, or like an amputation or something, and they're sitting there thinking like, what's wrong with me that this happened, that this will go away if I learn. I'm sorry, probably whatever lesson you learn, your amputation is not going away. Father is probably going to let the community continue to learn from that. So sometimes what you're dealing with, yes, sometimes it's because of you, but sometimes it may be for the glorifying of his name, with other people involved. But you should probably not write yourself that exemption or that blank check or what have you. And leadership can help you get to that place in a way that you know that it happened faithfully and that you didn't just exempt yourself. Because from time to time, the doubt will crop up if you did exempt yourself and say, well, this is not my fault, I'm just dealing with this. So it can be very liberating, very healthy, and very constructive to have counsel when you're going through those things.
Amen. Amen. Remember what I said, not all trials are discipline. Okay? Now, all discipline will definitely feel like trials, but it doesn't go the other way around. Some of your trials are time and chance. Some of your trials are just, they are what they are. Sometimes we just do dumb things and we end up in, injuries and other things. Sometimes it's born that way. You had no control over it. Whatever it is, doesn't mean that it's actually a discipline. However, it is a trial, and you are going to have to endure it, and there is a blessing if you can, especially if it's a handicap that you struggle with, and you don't get to have the same life everybody else gets to have who doesn't have that handicap. It's still a trial, and there's still going to be the endurance that brings blessing if you can endure. But it may not be something you need to repent of, fix, or do, because that's not why you ended up with cancer or diabetes or whatever else it is. Or, something happened and you got into an accident and you had physical damage to it. Maybe you're partially paralyzed or lost a limb, whatever. That's still a trial you will have to deal with, because he wants to watch how you deal with it. Yes. Right, which I was going to say. Okay, so he was bringing up the verse where the man who was blind, and he said, why was this man blind? Because he sinned, because his parents sinned? And Yeshua said, no, so I can heal him right now. That's the reason why he's that way. But he still needed to be enduring that, not even if he didn't understand it. Because it's in the endurance, it's in the attitude that the growth and the character comes. Okay, we don't have time for a whole lot more, so where's the mic now? Nate, go ahead. I'll get back there next.
I can admit, hi, my name is Nate, and I used to be one of those faith-based people, a very young one. And since I come to your teachings about nobody comes to the Father unless he draws them, it kind of brought that up that, hey, if they're not ready and you trying to push it, it's trouble for you. And when I said yes, that you did everything right and wrong, you had all the information absolutely right. And that's the way I was. I could have all the right information, but the wrong attitude and the wrong reasons for why I was sharing what I was sharing. So thank you for bringing understanding so I don't do that anymore.
Amen, amen. Good. Okay, Frank, go ahead.
We have found that in countering our Christianese, if you like, that it's best not to ask people to come to a study or to come to a meeting or anything like that, because you won't break the relationship anymore that way. The next time they meet, if you ask people to come to a meeting and they don't, the next time they see you, they say, oh, that's that Smith fella, and I told him I'd come and I didn't. And so if you don't ask them to come, and the Father moves them and disturbs their shalom enough to get them to want to come, then you have something to work with.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well said. All right, so if you have none or one or anything, Craig, we're going to just have to wrap this up.
There's one here from David Bachwick Rice. He's asking if you can please address Romans 2:5, how it's according to the hardness and an unrepentant heart that we're treasuring up wrath. And then it mentions works in verse 6.
Okay, look, to explain all of Romans, we'd have to go back to the beginning of chapter 2, probably even to chapter 1. It's talking about judgment. It says, look, a man, you are without excuse. Everyone who judges, for in which you judge, another one you condemn yourself. since you who judge practice the same wrongs. He's trying to explain how judgment really works. He says, but you are going to be, the reason that you're having all this problem is because, he says, or do you despise, in verse 4, the riches of his kindness and tolerance and patience, not knowing that the kindness of Elohim leads you to repentance? But according to your hardness and your unrepentant heart, you are treasuring up for yourself wrath in the day of wrath. When you go before the judge who renders according to everyone's works. He says, don't you understand what you're headed towards the second choice, the wrath and displeasure, not towards the everlasting life. See, the whole context was in terms of judgment. These people were busy judging others, not understanding the judgment that they were actually going to be sitting in front of one day. Hopefully that, David, did I answer your question? I know he's in Alberta. He's got to figure this out, but okay? But that's what you have to understand, that the context of why he's talking about it would take more to get to. There's no doubt, though, that what he's talking about is this. The judge he's talking about, the righteous judge, the king of the universe, when he judges, he's going to render to all according to what they've done. And based on what they've done, they're going to either receive as a earned reward of behavior, everlasting life, or condemnation and wrath, displeasure and wrath. The choice is yours. What are you going to choose to do? All right, hopefully that kind of makes that wrapped up. Why don't we all go ahead and rise and we'll get this closed off.